We continue now at the top of Daf Tesam and Beis in Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zara Daf 9b. On the previous Amar Papa said, let's say the Tana, and the Tana over here refers to an Amora who teaches Brises. Let's say he's not sure how many years after the year 4000 we are. Now he knows what century we are after the year 4000, but he doesn't know exactly. Again, the significance of the year 4000 is that's Yemos HaMashiach. From the year 4000 to 6000 are supposed to be the days of Mashiach. Mashiach didn't actually come in the year 4000 because of our sins, but those are considered Yemos HaMashiach. And again, he wants to know exactly how many years we are after the year 4000, so he can go over to a scribe. Now, the way that the scribes would date their documents is they would go by the beginning of the Greek rule, which was 380 years before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, 380 years before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is actually 552 years before the year 4000. So you just ask them what they're dating, and then if you add the number 48, you'll know the last two digits of the number. So, for example, let's say, the scribe actually wrote the year 552. So if you're going to add 48 to 52, 500, and you're going to say 552 plus 48, it's going to be 600. You know that it ends in a zero, so then you'll know that you're in the year 4000. If you wrote 553, so you add 553, you add 48, and it's going to end up being 601, and so then you know it ends in a 1, so you know it's year 4001, etc. And the Gemara said that the way to remember this is the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, Arboim Ushmona Ir. It talks about the 48 cities. Those are the 48 cities of the Levium. And now the Gemara just does the opposite calculation. V'itoi Safra. Let's say it's the scribe that doesn't know. He doesn't know the exact number to write. So Neshaili Latana Kama Katani. So he should just ask the Tana, how much did he teach? Meaning, what year did he bring down after the year 4000? V'nivsar minayu arboim ushmona. He could simply subtract 48. Umishkach le'lechumrein. In the same way, he can find the exact number. Again, we're assuming he knows the century. He just doesn't know exactly the tens digit and the ones digit. V'simonech, and the mnemonic to remember this is similar to what we said before. Safra betzira, that the scribe, he shortens, he's the one that is subtracting, and Tana Tosfa, the Tana, is the one that is adding. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yoshua. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, says, Haimandelo yoda kama shani b'shavuhu omein. If a person doesn't know what year in the Shemitah cycle he is in, so nitve echad shasa, he should add 1 year. We'll see Rashi in a moment. V'nachshav kloli, and then figure out the centuries b'yovli, according to the Yovels, uprate b'shavu, and the remaining years, meaning the decades and the single years, in terms of the Shemitah year. V'nishkol mimeya trei, and then he should take from 100, he should take 2. V'nishtei aprate, he should add those to the decades and the single years, and then he can calculate those decades in terms of the Shemitah year, and then he's going to know exactly where he is in the Shemitah cycle. And the mnemonic to remember this is Kizesh Nasayim Harab B'Kerav Haaretz, which mentions the idea of 2 years. And Rashi explains, if a person doesn't know where he is in the Shemitah cycle, again, he doesn't know in terms of the counting of the Shemitah cycle. Shahayu Yisrael monin v'holchen b'fnei abayis. Again, Klal Yisrael, they were counting the Shemitah cycle during the entire times of the Beis HaMikdash. Tekayim lo and Shvias bezman hazen noaga. And we've established that Shvias applies even nowadays. So you want to know where we are in the Shemitah cycle, even now, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. V'afilu l'Rebbe Meir, and even according to Rebbe Meir, the Mesoras Hashas here has Rebbe, even according to Rebbe, Do'amar bizman sh'atom meshamet karka atom meshamet ksafim, he says that there's only Shmitas ksafim, which is the cancellation of loans at the Shemitah year. That only applies when you have the concept of Shmitas karka, which doesn't apply nowadays. But modahud midrabanan naga. But even he admits that on a drabanan level, we do say that there's shmita. Beperak hashalech get of a mashkin beis hashalchin and gittin and moed katan. So in any case, if you're trying to make the calculation, it works as follows. First, Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yoshua says nitfei chodesh, you have to add 1 year al shnin demichurban v'yad shana shu omeid ba, and the years from the times of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash to that year that he's in right now. Let's say, for example, he's in the 9th year from the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. He has to add a year to make it 10. And what's the reason for that? May high time from the following reason. The Tanya, because we learned in a Brayso Megalgalin Zechus liyom zakai v'chova liyom chayev. It says that good things happen on auspicious good days and bad things happen on bad days. That's why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, both at the first and second Beis HaMikdash. Kishacharav habayis barishona, when the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Motzei Shabbos hayom, Motzei Shvias hayis, it was Motzei Shabbos. It was after Shabbos, meaning it was Sunday. It was Motzei Shvias, it was the first year of a Shemitah cycle. V'Tisha B'Av Hayin was Tisha B'Av. V'chein b'shni, and the same thing was true in the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Al Moshasa de Churban. So you see that the year of the destruction, Aschalta de Shmita leMahader Hava. So that was the beginning of a Shemitah cycle. Uman demoni l'shnei Churban. And so if a person is counting from the years of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, lo moni lahi shasa bahadei shnei de Churban. He should not count that year in terms of the years from the time of the destruction, ela bahadei shnei to come base. So that year actually counts as a year when there was a Beis Hamikdash. Meaning to say, in that year when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, most of that year the Beis Hamikdash was standing. It only got destroyed on Tisha B'Av, which is already towards the end of the year. And so therefore that year is not considered year one of the destruction. That's still the last year when there was a Beis Hamikdash. The next year is actually going to be the first year from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Now that next year was actually the second year of a Shemitah cycle. It wasn't the first year of a Shemitah cycle. And so therefore, Sahol v'nafak le'ruba b'tes b'av, again, most of that year when it was destroyed, most of the year there was a Beis Hamikdash because it was only destroyed on Tisha B'Av. Hilkach man deboy lemimnei Shemitah. So now if a person is trying to count the Shemitah cycles from the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, so technically speaking, year one from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is actually year two in terms of the Shemitah cycle, which is why, again, you're going to have to add a year. So losva l'shnas churban al minyan shni de basar churban, you have to add the year of the destruction to your years, meaning to say, let's say, for example, you are 9 years from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, you should actually just say you are 10 years, because if you say you are 10 years, then you're evening things out, because in the year that it was destroyed, which does not count as the first year from the destruction, but in that year, that was actually year one of the Shemitah cycle. And so therefore, to make an even simpler example, let's say from the time that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, let's say you are 7 years from that year when it was actually destroyed, that would actually be a Shemitah year. That's 7 years from the time that it was destroyed. But in terms of counting from the years of the destruction, you're really only counting 6, because you're not counting the year it was destroyed in terms of that. So that's why they're saying you should add a year, and then you'll know, you're already going to know that if you're 7 years from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and you're counting 7 because you're really year 6 from the destruction, but you're adding a year because of the fact that it was destroyed in the middle of a year, so then you're going to know you're really 7 years, so to speak, from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and that's going to be your 7th year of the Shemitah cycle. So that's the first thing you're going to do, is add 1 to whatever year you are in order to make the calculation easier. Then Menechshav Kalali, then what you can do is, you figure out your centuries, meaning Hameos biyovle, Shtei yovlos lameyo lekatzer minyano. So you can, in order to make it easier to do the calculation, so now you figure out how many hundredths of years you are. So you've already added a year because you're counting the year that it was destroyed. So now let's say you figure out that it's been 200 years, so let's make it 199 years from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, so you're going to add 1, because again, the first year of the Shemitah cycle is going to be the year it was destroyed, so you're really going to say that you're now 200 years from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, because you've gone through those Yovels. V'nishkol mikol meya tarti v'nishtei aprati. Now, from every 100 years, you have to take 2 years, and you have to add them on. And the point over here is as follows. Ki Rabbi Yehuda, that's because right now we're following Rabbi Yehuda. The Yomar shnas chamishim ola lekan u'lekan. Because when it comes to the Yovel year, there's a machlokes exactly how you count that Yovel year. Because you're going to count 49 years for the 7 cycles of Shemitah, and then comes a Yovel year, that is year 50. Now the question is, the next year after Yovel, is that now year 1, or is that going to be year 2? Now we're following over here, we're following Rabbi Yehuda that actually the year following Yovel is year 2, meaning the Yovel year really is year 1. Essentially what that means is that the Yovel years don't add anything to your cycles whatsoever. So if you're going to say, for example, that you went through 4 Yovels, that does not mean that you went through 4 sets of 50 years, because that actually means you went through 4 sets of 49 years. And so for every 100 years, you have to deduct 2. That's what we're saying over here. So again, you're following Rabbi Yehuda Damar, Shnas Chamishim Ola Lekan U'Lekan. You're going to say the 50th counts both ways. Hishnas Yovel, it's the year of Yovel. V'Hishnas Tchilas Hashmit Haba also ends up being the year of the beginning of the next cycle of Shemitah. And so therefore, really, the Yovel year doesn't really count for you as anything. It just counts as the next cycle. The only reason we're even involving the Yovel here is because Rashi says it can make it a little quicker for you to do the calculation. In reality, the Yovel year doesn't do anything for you, because the Yovel year is actually the beginning of the next cycle. So you're just going through cycles of 7 years. V'nimnis l'rosh Yovel habo, it's counted again for the beginning of the next Yovel cycle. The Iker Rabbanan. Now, if we are following the Rabbanan, ha'amishnas chamishim hi shnas Yovel hi, they actually say that the 50th year, which is the year of Yovel, Shnas Chamishim, Uvechamishim Va'achas, Maschil Minyan Yovel Haba. And you actually start in year 51, you're going to start the next count. Nimtzat Shana Mitosefes Al Seder HaShmita L'chol Yovel. According to them, you're actually adding a year to the Shemitah cycle with every Yovel that goes by. Ul Rabbi Yehuda, Misheischilu Limnos HaShmitin Lo Zaz HaSeder, Misheva HaShanim L'Zayin Shanim. Again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's always 7-year cycles. The Yovel does not interrupt that 7-year cycle. And so now, returning to what Rav Huna Breid Rav Yoshua said in terms of making the calculation, let's say you have somebody who knows that he is 99 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Now again, you should add 1 year because the year of the destruction itself was actually the first year of the Shemitah cycle, but it does not count as year 1 from the destruction, so just add a year, so you're really 100 years from the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Now you have a simple calculation, says Rav Huna Breid Rav Yoshua. Now you have basically 2 Yovels. If you have 2 Yovels, each Yovel is 50 years, so now you know you've went through exactly 2 Yovels. However, you're going to have to subtract 2, because for every Yovel, you really have to subtract 1, because again, that 50th year is really the beginning of the next cycle. So if you're going to subtract 2 from the number 100, you're actually at year 98 in this situation, and now you figured out that you're at year 98 in the Shemitah cycle. All you have to then do is divide by 7 to figure out exactly what year you are in within the Shemitah cycle. And of course, in this example, if you're at the year 98, so you're actually at the last year of a Shemitah cycle, you're actually in a Shemitah year, because again, year 49 is going to be a Shemitah year, and then year 98, in the same fashion, year number 98 is going to be a Shemitah year. And then the V'simonech, again, it said that the siman for this is Kizesh Nasayim Harav. So Rashi says, V'siman delo tavid k'Rabbanan. This is just a siman not to do like the Rabbanan. How do you know that we should follow Rabbi Yehuda and not count the 50th year separately, but rather say that the 50th year is the first year of the next cycle? How do you know not to go like the Rabbanan, Elok Rabbi Yehuda? Rather, you should go like Rabbi Yehuda, Lemishkal Tarti Shni Mikol Meya, that you should always subtract 2 years from every 100 years. That's just this pasuk of Kizesh Nasayim. That's the pasuk of Kizesh Nasayim. Now Rashi over here notes, Meseches Erchen and Meseches Erchen Porchinan Rabbi Yehuda. We actually ask a question on Rabbi Yehuda, because what did we just say above? We said Churban Bayis Sheni b'Motzai Shvius. We said that the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, it took place in the first year of a Shemitah cycle. Now, how is that going to work? Mimashkachasle, does that actually come out? If you calculate that, does it actually come out that the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash is in the first year of a Shemitah cycle? It says Michti. Let us see. Bayis Sheni Kama Kam. How long was Bayis Sheni? It was Arba Meos Ve'esrim. It was 420 years. And so now Rashi continues, if you have 420 years and you're following Rabbi Yehuda, so Pashlei Tamne Shni Li Arba Mea Yovle. First of all, the Yovel years do not count separately, so you're going to have to subtract 8 years for those 400 years. Again, you subtract 2 years for every 100 years in order to figure out the mathematical cycle. So you're going to subtract 8 years. Shadinu Ha'esrim. Now you take those 8 years that you subtracted and just add them on to the 20 years. It's a 420 years of the second Beis HaMikdash. So you have now 20 years. You have to add on another 8 years that are left over, because again, we're following Rabbi Yehuda. So now you have Hare Esrim Ushmona. So now you have, technically speaking, 28 years in terms of figuring out how many cycles you actually have. Now, if you have 28 years, how many cycles of Shemitah are in 28? So you're going to have Eshtakach Devishnas HaShemitah comes out that it's actually in a Shemitah year, Charav, that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, because 7 times 4 is exactly 28. 28 divides exactly evenly in the number 7. And so therefore, it's not going to come out that it's the year after the Shemitah cycle. It's not going to come out year 1 that the destruction is, according to Rabbi Yehuda. It should come out in the year of Shemitah itself that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And so the Gemara over there in Erchen answers, Hanoch Shis Shenin ad Solik Ezra Makdish. There was actually 6 years until Ezra actually came up. So Lo Manu Shmitin. So until Ezra actually came up and was Mekadesh, they didn't actually count Shemitah. So even though it's 420 years, you have to subtract 6 from 420, and so therefore you're really going to end up with 414. Hilkach dal minayu shis shni. So therefore you have to subtract another 6 years. You can also subtract the other 6 years from 28. So you do 28 minus 6, and if you do 28 minus 6, so now you're going to get to the number 22. Eshtakach de ve'esrin v'tarti li yovel charav. So it's going to come out that 22 years from the yovel is when it was destroyed. Now if it's 22 years, so 7 times 3 is 21, plus you have 1 extra year, v'hi motzai shvius. That ends up being Motzai Shvius, and that's how you can arrive at the calculation that the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash actually was on the first year of the Shemitah cycle. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Chanina says, Achar arba meyos l'chorban habayis, once 400 years passes from the time of the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, at that point in time Rabbi Chanina felt that Mashiach would come. So im yomer lachadam, if someone would say to you, Kach sadeh shava elef dinarim, take this field, it's worth 1,000 dinar, but you can buy it b'dinar echad, you can buy it for just 1 dinar, lo tikach, says Rabbi Chanina, you shouldn't buy it. The idea is you shouldn't be buying land outside of Eretz Yisrael, because Mashiach is going to come already 400 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. That's what Rabbi Chanina believed. And the Gemara continues, B'masnisaton, and the Brisa was taught, Achar arbos alpayim umasayim ushloshim v'achas shana lebrias olam. After 4,231 years from creation, that's when Mashiach is going to come. Im yomer lachadam kach lachsada shava elef dinar b'dinar echad. If somebody says, buy this field, it's worth 1,000 dinarim, you can have it for 1 dinar. Again, al tikach, you shouldn't purchase it. The Gemara says, my beinaya, what's the difference between them? What is the difference between 400 years from the destruction and 4,231 years from creation? Ika Beinayu, the Gemara says the difference is Talos Shanin. The difference is 3 years. Demasnisa Tafya Talos Shani, because the Brisa actually adds 3 years. Now Rashi explains, again, Al Tikach, you shouldn't buy it. Shehi Kates HaGeula. Again, 400 years, according to Chanina, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is the redemption. You're going to go back to the Beis HaMikdash, you're going to go back to the inheritance of your forefathers. Why should you even lose out 1 dinar? The Masnisa Tafya Talos Shanin, the Brisa adds on 3 years. L'cheshben HaBrisa, meaning to say, according to the Brisa, Moshe HaGolus Shalosh Shanam Yosef, the Golus is going to be 3 years more than Rabbi Chanina said. The Amrina Le'el, now Rashi does the math. We said earlier, Achar Kuf Ayin Beis Shanim La'achar Churban, 172 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, Nishlamu Arba Alpayim. So that's going to be the year 4,000. 4,000 comes 172 years after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, Hosef Aleim Reish Lamed Aleph to Kotani Bebraisa. Now, if you add on another 231 years, which is what the Brisa is adding, Harei HaKetz La'achar Tov Gimel L'Chorban. It comes out that after 403 years from the destruction, that's when the end comes. That's when the redemption comes. Rabbi Chanina Tov Kamer. Rabbi Chanina just says 400 years after the destruction. That's a difference of 3 years. That's what the Gemara means. And Rashi notes, Kisham Rabbi Chanina Lemil, when Rabbi Chanina said what he said 400 years after the destruction, Adayin Lo Avru Tov L'Chorban, it still wasn't, he lived before that time, so he was trying to predict when the Geula would come. And the Gemara continues, Haushtar, there was a document to have a ksibbe, that it was written in that document, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Amud Aleph.